Well, hey everyone, this is Living Power, your online Bible study where we are walking through the Bible in a year. My name is Shannon Mullins, and it's my pleasure to be leading you through the Bible this year. We are in the book of Judges, and we're going to be in the book of Judges about 3 more days, so really about a week's time. And the book of Judges is really pretty short. I mentioned to you a couple of days ago it's not one of my favorite books of the Bible, but it does have great history stories and spiritual lessons in it, so it's important that we look at it. We've looked at a couple of the judges over the past couple of days, and we were introduced to a particular man yesterday, and we're going to continue with his story today. Before we get started, I have a question for you. Have you ever made a promise in haste and then later regretted making that promise? Can you remember of a time when you did that? Well, we probably all can remember about a time where we said something in haste, for sure, and wished we could take it back. But how about a promise? A promise that absolutely had to be kept. And when you regretted it, you realized, oh no, I have to fulfill this promise. But for whatever reason, not so much that you didn't want to, but you realized that you shouldn't do this, that you had made a rash, a hasty promise. Well, that is what we're reading about today with Jephthah's vow, where he makes a promise and he realizes, oh, what has he done? So what I want to do today is read to you from verse 29, chapter 11, the vow. And it says, "At that time the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah." Now let me stop here and say, in the Old Testament, we don't see the Spirit of the Lord indwelling in a particular person their whole life. It would come upon someone and then leave them at certain periods of their life for a particular purpose. And so here he's being filled with the Spirit. And it says, "And he went throughout the land of Gilead and Manasseh, including Mizpah and Gilead, and from there he led an army against the Ammonites." So he's being raised up as a judge. He's Israel's 9th judge. "And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord." Now he's in the Spirit, and he's making this vow. He says, "If you give me victory over the Ammonites, I will give to the Lord whatever comes out of my house to meet me when I return in triumph, and I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering." Now, a couple points about this. I hope you've already read your reading today, because I'm going to completely give away the ending to the story if you haven't. So you might want to shut off the tape if you haven't read it yet, and just at least read the beginning part of the reading today before you continue. If you have read it, stay with me. Here are the points that I want to make about the vow. God did not require that he made the vow. God had already given him provision to be successful. He already had the Spirit of the Lord inside. Did he keep the vow? Well, there are rabbis that feel one way and rabbis that feel another way. Here are the two camps. One camp believes that he did fulfill the vow. His name it did not continue because that was his only daughter, and that assuming he didn't have any more children, he would have had no descendants to carry on the family name. The other camp believes that to sacrifice her and actually kill her as a burnt offering would be worse than breaking the vow, and that he did not do that, and that what he did was dedicate her to the temple, and that was what she meant by not having children of her own, that she was not lamenting the fact that she was going to give her life, but that she wanted those 2 months to lament over the fact that she would never have children. Because remember, in those days, not having children was really the worst thing that could happen to a woman. And so she was not killed by her father, but she was given to the Lord as an offering, a life offering to him. Now, you might say, well, surely when he saw his daughter come outside, he would have just said, "Oh God, not oh God, but oh God, I am not going to be able to keep this vow to you." And that God would have said, "Okay, that's fine." Well, in Deuteronomy 23, verse 21, it says you must keep the vows you make to the Lord, so don't make a hasty vow. So here we're learning it is so important to watch what we say. It is so important to be careful of the promises that we make, because we sometimes just don't have control, do we? And we just need to be really careful of our word and promises and things that come out of our mouth. In Proverbs 13:3 it says, "Those who control their tongue have long life. Opening your mouth can ruin everything." Now that's, of course, the New Living Translation that we're reading. Don't you just love that translation? But it just brings to mind a remembrance to control our tongue. And one of the members of our class, Vonda, she's a very faithful poster to the commenting. And she is actually one of my mentors and was one of the speakers that I looked up to and have had training under. And she taught me one thing that I'll never forget. Before she speaks, she says that she prays, "Lord, put a guard over my mouth, that only the things that come out of my mouth are truth, and that they would only be words that you want me to say." And I use that prayer also before I speak and teach. And that's my prayer today. It's my prayer always, is that the Lord would put a guard over my mouth and prevent me from saying something that would be harmful or that would be untrue. So maybe that would be a prayer that you would want to use too, because it's just a great everyday prayer. Lord, put a guard over my mouth this day, that everything that comes out of it glorifies and blesses you, and it would be used to build up others. If I know my mom is watching this tape, her name is Diane, and she's probably thinking of her favorite Disney character. Her favorite Disney character is Thumper. And do you remember what he said in the movie? If you can't say something nice, don't say nothing at all. That's how he said it. Don't say nothing at all. And that's just a good reminder to us today. Watch the words that come out of your mouth. Now in chapter 13 in Judges, I wanted to explain something that might be a little bit confusing. Shibboleth, they're talking about this place, Shibboleth, and I read in a commentary that it said, the way they said the word gave it away for where they were from. So as you read chapter 13, there really isn't anything more to it that you need to understand there, but that was kind of an inside joke that we wouldn't understand if you didn't have that bit of history. So, chapter 13, we're introduced to a man named Samson. And I bet you in Sunday school, if you did grow up in Sunday school, maybe you've heard of Samson and Delilah. Well, we are 20 years ahead of him meeting Delilah, and we will get to that story. However, today we're seeing how he grew up as a child. We're seeing the miracle around his birth, and that he does become one of Israel's judges. So the setting around his birth is very interesting. Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, so the Lord handed them over to the Philistines. Remember, we've been talking about this cycle over the last couple of days. The Israelites fall away, then they worship other gods, then God oppresses them, lets these enemies oppress them, so that, this is so important, why does he do that? So that they will turn back to him. They turn back to him, he raises up a deliverer to deliver them, and the cycle continues over and over again. The Philistines oppress them for 40 years. An angel comes to the woman, who happens to be Samson's mother, and says, "You will give birth to a son, but she's not to drink wine during her pregnancy, and this baby is going to rescue the people from the Philistines." Now notice he's giving her this promise for the Israelites. She's pregnant, a baby can't deliver them, so it's going to be at least 20 more years maybe until he comes of age, I'm just guessing. So isn't it interesting, God's timing is not always as immediate as we want it to be. They've been oppressed for 40 years. How long had they been crying out, "God, brings a deliverer through Samson, but he's got to be born. So he will be dedicated as a Nazirite from his birth to his death. And remember back in Numbers 6, verse 2 to 6, there were 3 characteristics, requirements of a Nazirite. Don't touch a dead body, don't drink alcohol, and don't cut your hair. And remember, some people, didn't we read back in Numbers that some people would take this vow to the Lord for a period of time? But here we're seeing that God ordained him to be a Nazirite for his whole life. So I think there were other people, though, who would take up this vow, and this Nazirite vow, and only do it for a particular period of time. But did you read in the dialogue between the husband and this angel who had come to deliver the news? The husband says, as you might well imagine, "What's your name?" And the angel says, "Why do you ask me what my name is? It is too wonderful to understand." And it's my understanding, and maybe yours too, that that was the angel of the Lord, and that really was Jesus, because he's the only one that has a name too wonderful for us to understand. If you ever have an opportunity to study the names of God, oh, that's just a wonderful, wonderful study, because it just reveals so much about who he is and his attributes. Now, Samson was a man with issues, okay? God will use anyone, and thank goodness he doesn't just require perfect people. And Samson did not always stay true. When you read in the lesson today, you're going to see that he was born in a godly home, but didn't really honor his parents too much. They wanted him to marry within his own line, but he liked how this other woman looked, and she was from the, did it say where she was from? I can't recall, but she was not from his tribe, and the parents didn't really want him to marry her, but he was kind of flippant about it. So I remember reading that it said his mother didn't realize God was at work in this and creating an opportunity to work against the Philistines, because it was God's plan that the Philistines would not oppress Israel anymore, and he was working in this whole situation. And the mother, so many times we can't always see God working in our situation either, but she didn't realize God was at work at this, so I suppose she was pretty upset over his choice of a wife. Well, we also learn in the reading that he kills a lion, and he ends up putting honey in the lion. Well, this would have been in direct opposition to one of the Nazirite requirements, touching the dead body, the carcass of a lion. He wouldn't have been able to, was supposed to do that, but he did it anyway. And then at this big feast, it doesn't say that he drank wine, but he may very well have had some wine, and so that would have been the second vow being broken. The rule of the Nazirites was not to drink fermented wine. So he may have done that during the marriage feast. This whole riddle that he sets up was very, very sneaky, and it was probably a little bit prideful because he wanted everybody to know that he'd killed this lion. And the riddle was about him killing this lion. Well, how was anybody going to know that he'd gone out there into the field and he'd killed a lion with honey in it? There was no way they could have solved that riddle. So I'm not really sure what he was trying to accomplish. If you know any more about the background into Samson, please put that on the blog today. But we do know that he was a judge of Israel for 20 years. And it seems like a lot of the problems in his life was caused by a woman. So women, be very careful that you don't cause problems for your man, because men will get into trouble because of a woman. Certainly. And all the men in the class are going, amen. Amen to that. Some things are not as easy as they seem. Some things look bad, but they're really not. And here we can't really see, they can't see God working, but we have the written word, and we can see that God was working, and we can see what he was doing was raising up Samson to deliver the people because they had cried out to him and that they had turned from their ways. So, be encouraged today that we cannot always know exactly what God's doing. Remember, we are people that live on God's promises, not explanations. And that will have to be enough for today because we're out of time. So, blessings to you. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. Stay firm, stay strong with me. I can't wait to see you again tomorrow. Blessings.